Long ago, deep in the heart of a dense forest, there was a village called Oduma. The villagers were simple folk who relied on farming, hunting, and weaving to sustain themselves. But Oduma was not just any village. It was shrouded in mystery. No outsider dared to visit, and no villager ever left. The forest surrounding it was known as Ayayuagu, the Forest of Secrets. One fateful morning, as the sun peeked through the thick forest, a stranger arrived. He was tall, dark-skinned, and wore a red scarf around his neck. His name was Kamalu. No one knew where he came from, but his confident stride and piercing gaze unsettled the villagers. Elder Aikno, the oldest man in Oduma, summoned Kamalu to the village square. "Who are you, and why have you come to Oduma?" Ikenga's voice trembled slightly, for he feared the wrath of the spirits who protected the village. Kamalu bowed slightly and said, "I am a traveler seeking shelter. I mean no harm." Aikno stared at him for a long time, then finally nodded. "Stay, but beware of the rules. Never wander into the forest at night, and never speak of what you see in your dreams." Kamalu accepted the conditions, but he could sense the tension in the air. That evening, as Kamalu sat by the village fire, he noticed a young woman named Adana. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her dark skin glowed in the firelight, and a golden anklet on her legs jingled softly as she moved. When their eyes met, it felt as if time stood still. But when Kamalu tried to approach her, the other villagers pulled him back. They warned him to stay away from Adana, because she belongs to the forest. Kamalu was confused. He asked them for answers, but no one would speak. That night, as he lay in his hut, he heard soft singing coming from the direction of the forest. It was Adana's voice, sweet and haunting. Against his better judgment, Kamalu followed the sound. The forest was alive with strange sounds. The trees seemed to whisper his name, and glowing eyes watched him from the shadows. He found Adana standing and her golden anklet glowing faintly. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice trembling. "Why do they say you belong to the forest?" Kamalu asked. Adana hesitated before answering. "I am cursed. Many years ago, the people of Oduma made a pact with the spirits of Ayayuagu. In exchange for protection, they offered me as a bride to the forest. I am bound to this place, and anyone who tries to free me will face the wrath of the spirits." But Kamalu was not afraid. "I will free you," he vowed. The next day, strange things began to happen in the village. Crops withered overnight, livestock vanished, and the air grew heavy with unexplainable things. The villagers blamed Kamalu. "You have angered the spirits," Elder Aikno shouted. But Kamalu refused to leave. He spent days studying the forest and its secrets. He learned of an ancient shrine deep within Ayayuagu where the spirit's power was strongest. If he could destroy the shrine, the curse binding Adana would be broken. One moonless night, Kamalu entered the forest armed with nothing but his courage and a sword blessed by Elder Aikno. The forest seemed alive, twisting and shifting to confuse him. Shadows danced around him, and ghostly whispers filled the air. When he reached the shrine, he found Adana waiting for him. "You can't do this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "If you destroy the shrine, the spirits will come for you." "I would rather die free than live a coward," Kamalu replied. As he raised his knife to strike the shrine, the spirits materialized, towering, monstrous figures with glowing eyes and clawed hands. They lunged at Kamalu, but he stood his ground. With a mighty strike, he shattered the shrine. The forest erupted in a blinding light, and the spirits let out an ear-piercing scream before vanishing. When Kamalu awoke, the forest was silent, and Adana was by his side. The curse was broken, and the village of Oduma was free. The villagers celebrated Kamalu as a hero, and Adana, no longer bound to the forest, became his bride. But even as life returned to normal, some villagers whispered that the spirits were not truly gone, that they waited, watching, in the shadows of Ayayogo. And sometimes, on moonless nights, the haunting song of a golden anklet could still be heard. Years passed, and Oduma began to prosper again. Kamalu and Adana lived happily, but the forest's eerie silence often weighed on them. The villagers tried to rebuild their lives, but a sense of unease lingered. One evening, Adana returned from the stream with a troubled look on her face. "Kamalu," she said quietly, "I saw something in the water." Kamalu frowned. "What did you see?" She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It wasn't my reflection. It looked like me, but its eyes, they were glowing." Kamalu felt a chill run down his spine, but he dismissed it as a trick of the mind. However, Adana's reflection wasn't the only strange occurrence. One stormy night, the rain poured heavily on Oduma, the wind howling through the village. Inside their hut, Kamalu and Adana sat by the dim glow of a small lantern, listening to the storm. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Kamalu stood up. "Who could be out in this weather?" he muttered, walking to the door. He opened it cautiously, but there was no one there. Instead, muddy footprints led away from the hut, disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. "Probably a child playing tricks," Kamalu said, trying to sound calm. He shut the door and returned to Adana, but she didn't look convinced. Moments later, the knock came again, louder and more urgent. Kamalu's heart raced. Grabbing the lantern, he went to the door and swung it open. This time, he saw someone. At the edge of the forest stood a figure, a woman wrapped in a torn, white cloth, drenched from head to toe. Her head was bowed, and her long, wet hair hung over her face. "Who are you?" Kamalu shouted, his voice barely rising over the storm. The woman slowly lifted her head, and Kamalu's blood ran cold. It was Adana, or someone who looked like her. But this Adana had hollow, glowing eyes, and her lips twisted into a chilling, unnatural smile. Kamalu's legs felt like stone. He wanted to call for help, but no sound came out. Before he could move, the figure turned and melted into the shadows of the forest, leaving nothing behind but the echo of her eerie smile. When Kamalu turned back to Adana inside the hut, she was staring at him with wide eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked. But Kamalu couldn't find the words to explain what he had just seen. Kamalu told Adana about the strange figure he had seen, but instead of calming her, she looked even more afraid. "It's them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The spirits. They're angry because we broke their pact. They want me back." Kamalu felt his heart tighten. He couldn't let anything happen to Adana. Determined to protect her, he went to see Elder Aiknor. The old man was much weaker now, his back hunched and his voice soft. Kamalu explained everything, from the knocks at the door to the figure in the rain. Elder Aiknor shook his head slowly. "The spirits do not forgive easily," he said, his eyes grave. "You disturb the balance, Kamalu. Even though the shrine is gone, their power still lingers. They will come for Adana, and for you." Kamalu clenched his fist. There must be a way to stop them. Aiknor sighed heavily and reached for a weathered scroll from a clay pot beside him. The scroll looked ancient, he handed it to Kamalu. "There is a way," Aiknor said. "An ancient ritual. But it comes at a great cost." "What is it?" Kamalu asked, unrolling the scroll carefully. "You must travel to the Forest of Echoes, far beyond Ayayogo," Aiknor explained. "There, you will find the Tree of Ages. Cut the tree and say Adana is free. She is no longer with the spirits, she belonged to the living. Say it 3 times. While you cut the tree, the spirits will be forced to let her go." Kamalu frowned and said, "What is the cost?" Ikenga's face was filled with sorrow. "The tree demands a life in return." Kamalu stared at the scroll, his mind racing. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear: he would do whatever it took to protect Adana, even if it meant facing the spirits or giving up his own life. For days he was confused and didn't know what to do. Kamalu woke up one morning. He kissed Adana goodbye and set out for the Forest of Echoes. The journey was treacherous, filled with roaring rivers, jagged cliffs, and eerie silence. Each night, he felt as if unseen eyes were watching him. When he finally reached the Forest of Echoes, it was unlike anything he had ever seen. The trees were massive, their bark covered in strange, glowing symbols. Whispers filled the air, growing louder as he ventured deeper. At the center of the forest stood the Tree of Ages, its massive trunk glowing faintly. Kamalu approached it, his heart pounding. He pulled out his knife and began cutting the tree and shouting, saying that Adana is free. She no longer belonged to them but the living. He said it 3 times as instructed by Elder Eichner. As he cut the tree, the whispers grew deafening, and shadowy figures began to emerge from the trees. They were the spirits, their forms twisted and menacing. "You dare defy us again?" one of them asked. Kamalu said he would do anything to protect his wife. As Kamalu was cutting the Tree of Ages began to tremble. A bright light erupted from its trunk, and the spirits let out an ear-piercing scream before vanishing. But the light didn't stop. It engulfed Kamalu, pulling him into its warmth. He felt his strength fading, his body becoming lighter. He realized then what Eichner had meant by the cost. Kamalu closed his eyes and whispered, "Adana, live free." Back in Oduma, Adana woke with a start. She felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. She ran outside and saw the villagers gathered, pointing to the forest. The once dark trees of Ayuagu were now blooming with vibrant flowers, and the air was filled with birdsong. But Kamalu was nowhere to be found. Adana understood what had happened. Tears streamed down her face, but she also felt a deep sense of peace. Kamalu had given his life to ensure her freedom and the safety of the village. From that day on, the people of Oduma lived without fear of the spirits. Adana became a healer, using her knowledge to help the villagers. And every evening, as the sun set, she would sit at the edge of the forest, listening to the whispers of the wind, knowing that Kamalu's spirit was watching over her. And though the forest was now peaceful, the villagers always remembered the price of their freedom. For in Oduma, love was stronger than fear, and sacrifice was the ultimate gift.